Right, Benny Hanna Man. I used to be Chop Chop Man, but now I'm Mr. Physics Man. Anyway, Benny Hanna jacket. Kind of funny. Anyway, nostalgia and such. Never worked at Benny Hanna. But anyway, Holiday. And others. I don't, the only good news here is my arguments are getting better and better. Their arguments are getting worse and worse. So the trend is good. It's just that there's just so much of these horrid and simply stupid arguments being made. So Holiday described this video. This is the title: Explaining Space/Time Dimensions Regarding Draft Science. Now you'd think it'd have something to do with this whole fucking idiotic conversation about their warping of their inertial frames in terms of breaking the space-time continuum shit or whatever in their little frames. But no, it just it has to do with this word dimension and the fact that somehow Holiday thinks that if we don't call time a dimension, that somehow time doesn't exist. Like if you argue that time is just a byproduct of the function of matter you put in the real 3 dimensions. The only dimensions that exist are the real 3 spatial ones. Any other dimensions don't have any of the properties of a dimension in that they're not real. The future doesn't exist somewhere. The past doesn't exist somewhere. They aren't dimensions. It isn't a place you can go. It isn't. And all you have is this function that matter has, which is matter takes time to get from one place to another. And the fastest piece of matter stuff goes the speed of light. And there's no other material thing that we know of that does time any quicker, that does movement any quicker. But it's just movement. It's not a dimension. It's just movement in the 3 real dimensions. It doesn't deserve the word dimension. There's no time dimension. There's just spatial dimensions. Fuck. He has a new video. I'll have to wait to be able to play it because YouTube won't play the videos till they're up a while. Push versus pull. Physics. Who gives a fuck? So I've only explained how this is so fundamental. And it's one of those key questions. Wave versus particle. Who gives a fuck? Plus, minus. Who gives a fuck? Let's get it wrong. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it does matter. It does matter. So, yes, just illustrating this is their desperation. You bring up something fundamental, elemental, and you point out how, you know what, you forgot to put the disk operating system in your operating system, and so the disks don't work, and so maybe you should do a reboot, with the features installed, not uninstalled, that kind of thing. And so you recognize that, yes, push is elemental, in the sense that I don't need any complex structure to realize the function of push. I just need to create the matter, create the movement mechanism, and it'll push all by itself. Push will happen. To have a pull, I have to create some kind of medium thing, that bends down, when the things move, and in 3 dimensions. I can make a 3-dimensional box with a bouncing balls, and they'll push against each other all over the place, but they'll never pull. And I can't create a floor that bends because it's 3 dimensions. So, ooh, that gets really gnarly and messy really quick. Really quick, I went from something really simple, a box with moving ball in it, and all of a sudden now it's gotten incredibly complicated for me to create any kind of pull mechanism. Incredibly complicated. So complicated you can't even imagine it. You can just sit here and say, I can't imagine a physical structure that can create that pull thing. Yeah, I can't imagine what the physical structure would be that could create pulls in 3 dimensions. Short of making a whole new thing in the box, a medium, a fluid, and then I can't figure out how to get the fluid from the center of each item out to the outside of the box again. So he says, fuck that. That's not an interesting concept. That doesn't have any meaning to this diagramming of our reality. It's like saying fossils have no meaning in the question of our origin. It's like saying geology has no meaning in the question of the universe's evolution. Fuck you, idiot. So I'll just jump through some of this. I think there's an interesting bit at some particular time where he says something just so silly. We've explained it to you. What, your obsession with including time as a dimension? Giving it dimensionality functions? When it's just a function of matter? It's a byproduct of the properties material things put in space have. If space doesn't have any material things in it, where's the time dimension? Oh, all of a sudden it's gone. So I can have three-dimensional space, and if I put something in it that doesn't move ever, where did time go? How come time doesn't exist anymore? Oh, that's right, because time isn't a dimension. Time is only the byproduct of the fact that the things move, and they move at a rate. That's it. There's no dimension they're moving to. They're just moving at a rate. The rate of movement is not a dimension. For fuck's sake.
Okay. Quick video to Draft Science.
It might as well not be to me, because it's not appropriately respectful for me to take it as a video to me. So until you learn how to make a video that has something called respect in it, you're going to get this back, fuckhead.
Special relativity, space-time, general relativity, space-time, dimensions. There are different types of dimensions.
Okay, says you. Says you. The word dimension now means, okay, you have three spatial dimensions, and then you have elephant dimensions, and then you have hippopotamus dimensions. We'll just make a dimension for every single thing in the universe. Every phenomenon in the universe, we'll just call it a dimension. I think that just ruins the whole fucking point of having a word called dimension. It doesn't mean anything if you start giving it to every fucking thing. Hairball. Ah, dimension.
I'm doing that. I'm doing the Trump emphasis.
Yes, whatever. Autistic similarly.
There are different kinds of dimensions. There are spatial dimensions, and there are, quite simply, mathematical dimensions.
Okay, mathematical dimensions. What a pile of crap that is. Just make it up. A mathematical dimension. No, it's a mathematical function. They're called functions in the formulas. That's exactly what they call them. Annihilation functions and creation functions. They're functions.
Or specification dimensions.
Specification dimensions. So again, just fuck the word dimension. So another word, it's just useless because the religious kooks have to keep their precious, fancy, immaculate conception. Well, it doesn't really mean it was immaculate. It just means that it was secret. Nobody knew about the, who the father was.
Dimensions as in dimensionality of the vector space. Dimensionality of
the vector space. So another thing invented, okay? There's such a thing as vectors. There's not vector space.
Mathematical space. There are,
I can't think of the words for it, but dimension, 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 dimension. It's all dimension, dimension. Dimension, dimension.
No. Minkowski space. The
Palkowski space, Inmendum space, Draft Science space. Let's all have our own fucking space.
What's another one? There's several spaces which are modifications on the notion of vector space.
Who cares? The purpose of this conversation is the fact that people have turned the future and the past into actual places, like you can go there. And you don't go there. Okay? The present is the only thing that exists, and the present bangs into the future. Yes, it does go there eventually, but it goes there by moving there at a rate. And that's it. Nothing fancy. It's not a real place. There's no place in time. It doesn't exist.
And it's a specification of how many numbers you need as information. Okay? Now, in in special relativity.
Again, who cares? How many numbers you need to do what? Again, if I'm predicting how long it's going to take a photon to get from point A to point B, I don't need to make time a dimension to figure it out. I just establish how fast the photon's going. There's no dimensionality required.
You need 3 dimensions, and they are separately spatial dimensions. Nobody calls or thinks time is a magical space.
So that's his claim, right? So you can't get more preposterous, right? I could go down the related videos of breakthrough, fantastic electric, blah, 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 all this, what space means, documentary, swirly. Bullshit. Establishing these things as separate dimensions just creates a bunch of woo. It's the entire function of calling time a dimension is to create woo psychology. Is to feed woo psychology. It's a function.
Spatial dimension. Time is just a number in the specification of events.
Yeah, I said that. I said it's just a fucking function. That's all it is. It's a function. It's what things can do. Things can move at a rate. Period. No dimension needed.
So if I say to you, I see you here, I'll see you here, or I will meet you at the end.
Yes, here would be now, but the future, there is no, it's a place and I'll get you there. No, it isn't. Okay? It just is in a analogistic form or metaphoric form, but there is no real dimension of the future. It's not a place. It doesn't exist. Space exists. Stuff is in it. You don't call the stuff that's real one word and then call the stuff that's unreal the same word. That's not logical.
Empire State Building, okay? Or I'll meet you on Venus, the North Pole of Venus, or something. It's just recognition of
the fact that you're using these phantasmagorical examples is more illustration of the danger of this abuse of language.
Uselessness of that information without agreeing a time upon which we'll meet.
And who's saying that would have to require you to call time a dimension? Time doesn't have to be a dimension for you to be able to figure out that because it happens at a constant rate and there are rules at how fast something can move, we can calculate what the movement will, how the movement will change the circumstance. And we're looking for change that equals me on Venus. And how long does that change, how much time is required for that change to take place? And we can calculate that. If it was a photon, we can say, yeah, it'll happen in 5 minutes. If it's a big giant pile of matter, well then we're going to know it's going to be a lot longer than 5 fucking minutes. But it has nothing to do with a dimension.
Similarly, if I want to specify events and trajectories, it's similarly meaningless without incorporating.
Again, and so his argument is if you don't call it dimension, you can't call it anything else. You can't call it a function. You can't say it's a property matter has. That's not rational. You can't do that. That's against the fucking law. You have to consider it a dimension. It can't be a function that matter has. Fuck you. Yeah, it can, and it's a much more rational way to understand what it does.
In the physics, the understanding, the mathematics, the mechanics of the number time allocation.
Right. It's the time allocation is generally spoken in terms of the rate at which light travels distance. Nothing about a dimension required. No dimensionality needed. Nothing. It doesn't need any special anything. It's just the rate at which, at the fastest, this is how fast how long it'll take. And then you just figure out how much longer the vector is because you have more matter to move. Fuck. Not complicated.
When the events happen. Nothing magical about it.
Again, there's everything magical about the idea of dimensionalizing time, because then people think it's a place you can go visit. I can go visit the past. I can go visit the future. I can go do this thing in some place called time. No, you can't. There's no such thing. It's just a function of matter moving. And you'll never be able to jump anywhere. It's not a place. It's not a dimension. Okay, ahead of me where the camera is a place in dimensional space. It exists. It's fucking real. It takes real time for photons to go back and forth between the two things. There's no dimension.
You've been told this before. You've had it.
Okay, you've been told what before? That you're emphatically saying, like some kind of Islamic lunatic, you're saying, believe in my Mohammed or fuck you. Well, fuck you back. No, I don't believe time is a dimension. It's a silly fucking designation. It's just a fucking function.
Explained. It's really frustrating to hear you.
Yeah, it's really frustrating to hear you fucking religious kooks keep thumping your fucking Bible. Your fucking Bible of bullshit. Absolute fucking word garbage. It's the religion of peace. Bullshit.
Keep going on and on and on. I'm pulling this up. Henceforth now, you never need to complain about...
Oh, that you solved the problem by just emphatically saying it's a dimension. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, fuck you. Silly, stupid explanation. The dumbest fucking video you've made to date. The fucking dumbest. No information value at all. No demonstration of any real time dimensions.
The nonsense of time being a dimension. It's
Again, he keeps saying the nonsense of time being a dimension. That's what they're calling it, dumbass. You don't even read your own Quran. That's one of the fundamental principles in your Quran, is the existence of a thing called space-time. And time being the fourth dimension. Space having three that we can pervert any way we want as long as we're in a fucking inertial frame. Fuck you and this gibberish.
It's just a number. Okay?
It's just a number. No, it's not just a number. It's a number that doesn't exist unless a material thing exists that's moving. Otherwise, it doesn't exist.
That comes along in a package of information that is needed.
Yeah, fuck this package of information shit. The universe isn't made out of packages of information. That's all a pile of word garbage also. A distraction from recognizing the reality. The fucking universe isn't creating information. The universe is an event, and you can describe it with symbolic representations. I don't have to fucking understand every cow on earth. I don't have to smell every one of their vaginas. I don't have to lick everyone's nutsack. Just sit there and have a representation of cow that's a simplification. You want to simplify something for doing a mathematical purpose? Fine. But don't say you now have, this is information. No, it's not anything real. It doesn't have anything to do with the real universe. It's a fucking simplification. It's a model. It's a toy compared to the reality. But yeah, it has enough similarities for your purpose. Making a distinction between platypus and cow. Well, I can do that without having the real platypus and the real cows. All of them, forever, in all of time. Yeah, I don't have to do that.
Calculations, and it's a statement that to do the calculations, I need 4 numbers.
Again, and what does that have? You need the fact that to figure out where something will be after it has traveled to a place at a rate. Okay, the fact that you have to know the rate at which it moves, yes. The fact that you have to have some information, yes. But again, that information isn't a dimension.
Is 3 spatial dimensions, and when it is.
And well, again, when it is doesn't say anything about, because we know when it is going to be precisely dictated by the rate of the movement. So we know the function is going to define what it's going to be in the future, where it's going to be in the future. It's not going to jump somewhere. It's going to obey the function of movement, the rate at which it moves.
Calculate where it will be, given criteria, forces and such, and when it will be at that where it will be. No magic.
Again, I'm the one claiming there's no magic. That's just a function of a material object being in the 3 spatial dimensions. That's one of the rules. It's not a separate dimension. It has none of the character of the 3 real dimensions. It has nothing in common with those dimensions. It doesn't deserve the word dimension because the fucking forward and back doesn't exist. Alright, so enough of that crap. The push-pull one will be no doubt amazing. Alright, so I figure I'll do a little bit of this, one more shot anyway, real quick. Hopefully. At the paradox argument. I mean, it's really not complicated. As I've tried to say, if you just think of it in terms of what they're saying about special relativity, who cares, general relativity, what they're saying about this space-time dimension is that this inertial frame somehow changes reality. And the reality being changed is the rules of light speed. Now, if we were just, if light was like everything else, like baseballs, we wouldn't have an argument, because everybody would concede it just goes faster, no problem, just like the baseball. Now, inertial frames are totally benign to an absolute frame, the recognition of the existence of an absolute frame. It's totally benign until you get to the subject of something with a constant speed. So if you're just talking about baseballs on trains, everybody's going to agree, well, most people who are rational, that if the baseball, we're throwing it back and forth and it looks like it's just going 30 miles an hour, that's how fast we're tossing it back and forth. And that's all it looks like. We don't see anything else. But we know if it goes out the window, we would agree that the baseball, say the train's going 70 miles an hour, that the baseball is going to hit whatever it hits outside going 80 miles an hour perhaps, something more than 70. And it's not going to be going back and forth. It's going to be going at this kind of weird angle. Everybody's going to agree that's the physical truth. That the baseball is going faster than we see. That it isn't going to go straight out of the window at 30 miles an hour and hit the thing that it was looking like it was heading towards. It's going to hit something else. Nobody thinks it's going to go hit the thing in the past. They know it's going to be hitting the thing in the future. The thing coming at it, not the thing behind it. That will be behind it when it gets there. Will be behind the train. So as long as we can agree that nobody's arguing that the baseball's only going 30 miles an hour and that the baseball won't hit what it's pointed at, what you threw it at, then we don't have a problem. But when it comes to light, all of a sudden the rules change. And somehow, you know, this miracle of being able to do this recognizing the truth that the thing has to be moving that funny angle. So again, the baseball on a train moving 70 miles an hour, the baseball's really, we see it going back and forth, but we know it's really doing this. We're both moving 70 miles an hour, and the baseball is automatically correcting, okay, we throw it this way, and it actually goes this way. Because we actually threw it that way. We just don't sense that that's what we did. Because we don't sense when the ball's in our hand that it's actually going 70 miles an hour this way. We have no recognition of that movement because we're going exactly the same way. And so the problem is when they say light does exactly the same thing, okay, we know that for the baseball to do this, it has to go 80 miles an hour. It has to. It can't do this unless it does. It has to go faster than this speed, and it has to go faster than this speed. That's what it has to do to get to this spot. So if there's a hole there, okay, the only way it gets to the hole is it has to go fast. If it goes too slow, the hole will keep moving and it will hit behind the hole. So it just can't get there unless it moves faster. And what they're saying is, on the special train now where we have light doing this, and it wouldn't matter, we could still make the train go 70 miles an hour, but we're not going to see the effect, obviously, at a slow speed. But you could make it any speed, and they're saying this is what's really happening, that the photon is doing exactly what the baseball does, except somehow it doesn't have to go faster. It can just go its regular speed. And it can't get there that way. Just the rules, I'm saying. You can't change the absolute space. So again, the argument is in absolute space, with regular material objects, there's no conflict with absolute space. Absolute space says this is exactly what happens. The thing goes faster. And the only thing that's fucked up is your perception. You're just not seeing the extra speed because you're going the same speed. But there's absolutely no conflict with absolute reality, where once we start using a time clock, all of a sudden you break the speed of light and you pretend that you can go a longer distance at the same speed, and you can't. Alright, so enough of that. So many subjects. I mean, I sort of did want to do the gravity thing, because it's so interesting, you know, when you start recognizing that gravity is really created by the actual motion. But the motion is hidden. You know, you don't see this thing moving, but there's stuff moving in it. It's moving all the time in all kinds of directions. And every time it moves one direction, it absorbs a little bit of force and holds it for that time. And if it was made out of gunpowder, it would be holding a lot of force. But it would have mass because of that. And the mass would represent the holding of force. That is, force that was going this way, and force that's going this way. Force is going all the ways it can possibly go, but it's holding that force. So that force didn't actually get to something else. And that's the nature of gravity. The fact that you have mass means you've already consumed force that would have gone somewhere else. But see, in the big picture of things, the further away you are, you're just such a tiny amount of the total force affecting something else. So the total force affecting something else is huge coming in, and this little tiny bit that you took when you're far away is so tiny. So it's not until you get really close to something that you start eating enough force to be significant to this other thing. But it's the fact that you possess it. You're holding it. And when you move, you're releasing it. Your movement is an obvious indication that you no longer hold it, because you're moving. Wrong way to say it. Clearly the implication of the force would have been to move the other object. If you're moving towards the other object, you're obviously doing the same thing as the force hitting the other object. If it did go where it was supposed to go, that object would be moving. Because you're moving, okay, that object can't be moving. It won't be moving. Because you're consuming the movement. That's what I meant to say. So anyway, so the idea is that that's sort of the inductive part of gravity. And the sun, pieces of the sun, have to actually move towards the earth for the earth to feel the gravity of the sun. Or some other planet, obviously. So the trick is also, it's kind of a weird one-way thing, in that whatever the vector is of your movement, which usually is towards something, right, directly towards it. So this thing moves directly towards this. Well, technically, any movement inside this circle, that is, if this object moves just a little bit in here, part of that movement is this movement, that vector. So any movement towards this thing is a consumption of a little vector arrow. And that consumption means that this thing didn't get hit by it, which means it's got more force this way, which means it's going to move this way. And in doing so, consume the force that would have pushed this thing back out. And so now it's going to push it further in. That kind of thing. But it's induced. And it's incredibly interesting. And for Hoffaday to say, push versus pull physics, who gives a fuck? It explains so much, so clearly. And he's just saying, fuck it. I, just like the rest of physics, will ignore the fact that your operating system sucks, your foundation is crap, and that all it takes to fix it is a little bit of a reboot. And recognize that, why don't you just fix this bullshit? Fix your incomprehensible, silly 17 ways to measure energy. Get rid of that stupid plus-minus upside down bullshit. You know, and yeah, start over with the push idea instead of this silly pull nonsense. Alright, so on to comments, I think. I'll make another video on that. Like I said, the gravity thing just gets more and more interesting, as is the two-slit phenomenon getting more and more interesting in my perception. Just recognizing that it's just this angle thing. So if I put this film here and I move myself back far enough and I put a bright light on me, theoretically you should be able to see the other me's then, because I'll be far enough away for you to see them. They're being created right now by this film, in the sense that it's going through and then it's deflecting, but it's deflecting at too sharp an angle for the camera to pick it up. And the other thing is that the ones your eye is what tricks you, okay? Because your eye is reversing them. So the one on this side is actually creating the illusion in your eye. The one, okay, the thing gets bent this way, and your eye perceives it this way. So it got bent this way, but your eye is seeing it that way. So the one you see over there was created by a bend this way. So I have to go through the explanation. But clearly the whole image, so there's a copy of everything that's at this, whatever it is, 15 degrees, everything goes 15 degrees. 15 degrees, there's another image, another copy of everything. That's what the lines are doing, is creating copies. And yeah, so that's sort of interesting in terms of recognizing what mechanical phenomena would create that, and how I may be able, through this idea of this whole image being moved, might be a way of completely deconstructing any hope that this has anything to do with an interference pattern. Because an interference pattern would lose the character, because you're talking like this thing is all random. And clearly it's not a random bit. It's that a percentage of the photons going through are just being diverted at those angles. And that's it. It's a percentage of all the photons. So you get a complete image, but it's only, say, 3 or 4% as bright as the original image. And it's been separated because it's now not doing the straight line thing. It's doing the curve line thing, which gives you this problem where these two don't match. Okay. So anyway, so yeah, I think there's going to be value in the future for that. That was a good experiment I did. It was completely accidental, because I noticed it the first time when I held the grating up and I said, look, it's transparent, you see that? the thing was in the background of the video, and I saw the duplicate image. I didn't see that, you know, the lights. Didn't see the original one. I saw the fake image of it separated in the background. I said, wow, something just happened there. That's interesting. And it was interesting. Okay, so now Pyrrho, I'll read his first just because it's the last, and just because it's so stupid, and it's sort of on the related subject of lensing. Okay, for the fucking 100th time, no, for the 100th time, I've already answered this silly piece of crap. You can't point the Hubble telescope at the sun. I've already talked about this. We talked about using a shield on the telescope, which would be simple enough. You know, just put this telescope lens is round. You put a shield going like this, so the sun can just travel right in, and you stop at the shield, and then you can do the area around the sun. But clearly, it's even easier just to say the sun's here, and you just move the telescope right next to the sun. I'm sure the Hubble telescope has been very close to the sun. So if you want to lie and pretend the Hubble telescope never, ever, ever went anywhere near the sun's corona, in all the years the Hubble telescopes existed, it wouldn't go anywhere near the sun. I don't believe that. Anywhere near it. What's the closest it's ever been to the sun? This is, by the way, this is one of the most precise instruments ever made by human beings. It can do a time-lapse photograph completely still of, you know, space, and see things 13 billion light years away because it's so steady, so stable. And yet they claim they can't stabilize it. We know the sun's rotation. We know exactly where the sun goes. That the Hubble can't just float right above the sun. That it can't just stay right in one place right above the sun. It knows exactly where the sun's going to go, and so the sun never gets in the image. It's completely black space next to the sun. There's no scatter around the sun. So this canard that they can't do the experiment is a pile of shit. An absolute pile of shit. It's a pile of excuse making that has no basis in any kind of reality. It's like saying you can't measure time unless you call it a dimension. It's as dumb as that. Okay. It would harm the detector. So again, when I say point at the sun, I'm obviously saying with proper shielding, with proper precautions not to look at the sun. I mean, duh. I would say that to somebody using a telescope. Don't look at the sun. I'm sure when they did the eclipse thing, they had to be, hey, don't look at the sun. You know, it'll ruin the photograph. Make sure you get the image at the right moment. You know, when the sun's blocked. Duh. Here, there are frequently asked questions on why it can't even point at the Earth. And again, who's arguing that they should point it at the Earth? It's a very reflective object. No one's arguing that. So again, it's just a bullshit excuse. Delete. I mean, I've already been over it in other videos. I'm saying with the same asshole. So that's the part that's just unexcusable. We already went through this conversation. I suggested they could take another satellite and create a shield that just goes in front of the Hubble telescope to make sure it can't get the sun in it. So the other satellite would see where the sun's coming and make sure it was always below the sun and lined up with the Hubble. And the sun would always be blocked out no matter what the Hubble tried to do. No matter how wacky the Hubble telescope got, it couldn't possibly hit the sun. But we know it doesn't go completely wacky. We know it doesn't because it already would have hit the sun and blew up or whatever it's going to do. So this is all just bullshit. We know it's an incredibly precise instrument. We know there's no problem. They could go 500 miles away from the sun and look at black space. No problem. So it's just a bullshit excuse. Preposterous bullshit. Bullshit on top of bullshit. Alright. Alright, so we're back to case for reality. Alright. Oh, you're wrong about Michelson-Morley experiment. First of all, it doesn't matter if the light is diffracting because the interferometer is measuring changes in the pattern. Just amazingly stupid. I have already been over it. It does matter. The two beams are diverging at a different rate through distance. They're spreading They have a different spread. They're a different size. Two different sized beams will not give you an accurate recombination. You can't combine two beams of a different size and say it's the same thing. It's as if I had two bullseye patterns and they were of different focal length. So one was little and one was big. And if I combine those two, well, there's no point. You can get the idea, right? It's not complicated. If I combine those two, I'm not going to get an accurate description of reality. Alright, and clearly, as pointed out, the big one has the secondary problem of, because the light's not going straight, it is in fact fringing in the sense that the distance is longer and it's creating the prism effect, which is it's separating the red, green, and blue light. So again, it's bullshit. It's changing the phase of the light. To hit the target, whatever you're looking at, the light that's been diverged has to travel a longer distance. Therefore, it's not the same phase in its pattern. Alright. So, fuck you. You can keep saying a lie. Where's your source? Where's your source? That's what I'll say to you. Where's your source? And the two-way mirror still doesn't diffract because there are so many holes that the Fresnel principle says the point source from one wave front without noticeable diffraction. Well, again, then you can explain how a half mirrored glass can be done with perhaps millions of tiny holes. I've never heard of that. And still, even if you did, it doesn't change what a diffraction gradient does. So I've never seen anybody say that if you could make a diffraction gradient, they make them. This one's 500 lines, I think. They make them with 500 and 1,000. I don't know what technology will allow them to do. So maybe they can't go to 10,000. But I'm sure if you do go to 10,000, all you do is make the little dots even more perfect. That's all. You just make the images clearer and clearer. You don't change the fact that the effect happens. And you kill more light because you have lines where the light is actually consumed. So your images will get duller over time. But there's a clear relationship. And again, this is all part of Heisenberg's rules, idiot. If you could actually create a mirror and do a half-silvered mirror, and you eliminate diffraction because you have such tiny holes, then you broke Heisenberg, idiot. And now you can actually know how fast you can know the momentum and location of a photon explicitly. So if you make your holes that small, then you'll have precise information about the location of a photon, and then we'd actually be able to do all kinds of really neat experiments because now we would know exactly what the direction of the photon is. So your statement is obviously inconsistent with your own physics. So you lose in more than one way on that argument. It's a silly made-up pile of shit. Cite a source. That's what the math you won't learn says. No, it's not in the math. That's just a lie. Show the math. Show the math where the diffraction disappears as I make the slit smaller. Show any math on diffraction where that's true. I can make the diffraction go away if I make the slit small enough. Show me where that's true. It's exactly the opposite of what Professor Lewin says, which is you can't do that because it violates Heisenberg. So, yeah, so he got 5 thumbs up for a made-up pile of shit. So let's just understand, you people are defending preposterously wrong, silly explanations just made up by trolls. And that's the best you can do? You can't bring anything better than that to this argument? You suck at physics. So, case for reality. Science have measured time dilation many ways. Again, I'm not arguing that there isn't a correlation between velocity and a retardation in function. So if you give a clock velocity, the clock will not function properly and it will not tell proper time. And the same is true for all the other stuff that has a timed cycle that's a material function. If the matter has to be doing something else besides just doing matter things, then that's multitasking, and that means there'll be a delay in how fast it does the other thing. I've been over it and over it, but see, you don't even pay attention. Anyway, scientists have measured time dilation many ways. No, they've measured time retardation, if you want to say, or function retardation. So, muon decay, I've already explained. Of course, you accelerate a muon, it can't radioactively decay at the same time because it's not spinning as fast, it's not doing any of the functions it personally has as fast because it has to waste time moving. The other force inside of it is competing with its native forces, and therefore it won't do its native things as fast because it's doing this other thing called moving. Atomic clocks was the same thing as a muon pretty much. It's just another chemical or mechanical function of the atomic process that, yes, the correlation is velocity retards material processes. There's no dilation of anything called a time. There's just a retardation of process. Just like time doesn't slow down when light goes through glass. The light doesn't slow down. There's an explanation that's completely sensible, that the light isn't taking a straight path. And that's why it takes longer. Bouncing photons back and forth. I don't even know if that, with muon decay, atomic clocks bouncing photons back and forth. That doesn't even make any sense. Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense at all. The results are all consistent with each other. Again, I'm not disputing the fact that there is function retardation with velocity. Yes, your functionality will retard as velocity is imposed because it's an actual event. Velocity means you are collecting force, and now you have a bunch of extra force inside of you that's competing with your native force. If they weren't, then general relativity would be disproved. Well, general relativity is nonsense and will be disproved by other logical explanations that are much more sensible. But again, general relativity doesn't say time dilates for any other reason than the association with the velocity. The velocity is the cause. So just understand that. There's no connection to any dimensionality or warping of anything. You don't need to do any of that crap but establish a relationship between velocity and function. Things don't function the same when you give them velocity. So again, a false premise that I'm arguing that there's no such thing as time function retardation. I am arguing that the functionality of matter is changed when you give it velocity. Okay, in my opinion, light's radiation through the ether. These are two same comments. I'm deleting one of them. Alright, in my opinion, light's radiation through the ether is an example of bending space, or bending the ether. Even the word radiation, radiation is always typically like a light radiates. Radiation is always, in my opinion, sort of describing something that's radiating in directions, like a radius, like a circle. And waves only do that in the superficial sense. We know that any real wave we see in any medium, it's created by a bunch of individual things. There's not one thing creating the wave. It's a bunch of energy creating the wave, a bunch of radians of energy making the wave. We know that's true in water, we know that's true in any medium. So using the word radiation to describe something that's a perturbation in an ether, I think is kind of just breaking language, because it doesn't do that. Waves don't move that way. Waves are collections of things that create waves, not single things. It's either this or light is indeed a particle. Yes, one or the other. I happen to believe it is radiation. So he says radiation when we know that the most outstanding use of that word is radioactive decay, and we know that that's rays of energy. So I mean, turning that into waves, in my opinion, is perverse. The word radiation really isn't a word well suited to describing the function of waves, of single things perturbating through mediums. I've been trying to get Wheeler to comment on this for the last few days. Again, light is either a particle or a wave, radiation. So he has wave/radiation. I think radiation, the word, goes better with particles. So I just think it's silly. That's why they call them alpha, beta, and gamma particles. So, which is it? Please comment. Well, I mean, sorry, Jeff, but you really just aren't paying attention. I mean, you want me to personally tutor you on my 400 videos, my entire theory. I mean, you could just go to the website and you'll find out immediately that I have no use for waves. They don't have any meaning. They're always explained by radiance of something. There's no such thing as waves. Okay? Huygens waves are the only waves that are some sort of less than quantizable, and they're just completely made up nonsense. An infinite number of them in every space you create. That's just made up rubbish. So real waves are always created by radians of energy, not a radian of energy. So it's a silly use of the word wave. Alright, nice light show, almost like plasma ball. Well, it really wasn't, the purpose wasn't for the light show. Funny that only people I see questioning how gravity works are those flat earthers. Well, I think there's lots of people questioning it. The rope guy questions it. You know, he has his own theory. Ken Wheeler questions it, and he doesn't believe in a flat earth. So, I mean, gee, it seems like your comment is completely, like, why don't you give me some statistical data? Because I don't think that's true at all. I think it's absolute rubbish. Yeah, bullshit. Fuck you. Stupid cunts. I think only religious nuts are defending silly dimensional. I went to the time dimension. Yeah, I think that's silly. Only people who, like, you could probably find a huge correlation between people who believe in Tinkerbell and people who believe they can move in time. Alright, Dean T. Some kind of creepy fucking icon. Fucking douchebag, no doubt. Anyway, nobody invented electricity. How's this news to anybody, idiot? Any more than fire was invented. It was discovered. So, where did I even say anybody invented electricity? Where did I say that? How is your comment rational or connected to anything? Your anger is sad. You should fact check. Yeah, well, you should, you know, probably wash your hands before eating, because you obviously are a poo hugger. It seems as though you are oddly jealous. It seems to me that you're desperately unfashionable, and that's why you have to do your little hair over your eye, because you're not cool enough. If this is all you grasp at attention, you should consider another route. Again, this is coming, like I said, I mean, I could show the icon, but look, I'm stylish and shit. Yeah, you're really cool. No. You also seem to be an animal hater. Well, I'm just not even going to read. I'm not going to bother reading any further. Just too stupid. Goodbye. Right. I spent 40 years feeding cats because I hate animals. Right. I find it amusing how you say the diffraction disk is duplicating the image, when quite obviously the red light is getting dispersed more than the green and the blue light. No, it isn't. No. Obviously it's got a bigger wavelength, so it takes up more space. Yes, that's true. Things that have a wider wave, twice the wavelength of the blue, will, when moved, reveal themselves to take up more space. Yes, that's what they do when you stretch them. So let's see how to, when you proportionally stretch. Let's see how to say this. Well, fuck worrying about that, silly. Let's see what the rest of the argument is. Is duplicating the image, that's in quotes, when quite obviously the red light is getting dispersed more than the green and the blue light. Well, by saying duplicating the image, I actually said, I think in that video, that clearly one image is separated and the other image isn't. The center image isn't separated. The peripheral images are separated. And I've explained that's because of the angle. The straight line, it's all straight lines. So there's no angle problem. It's when you create the angle. As soon as you angle, then you're creating that uneven angled surface where the blue light and the red light will travel different distances. Jeez, dumb. You say there is a duplicate image as you're looking with your own eyeball at 6 different images, all of different colors on the screen. Well, they're not of different colors, they're of the 3 primary colors. But whatever. The 3 real colors. The 3 kinds of light that are coming off the object. The different wavelengths are being dispersed different amounts. Well, this dispersed word is just really useless. They're being deflected at a slightly different angle. That's all. The different wavelengths are being dispersed different amounts. This is why there is a red image near the edge of your screen and a green image closer to the center and the blue image closer still. Well, it's not closer to the center, but whatever. Which is exactly what somebody learned in the workings of optics would expect. Somebody who learned optics. It's just so funny. You're the asshole saying that same thing won't happen with a two-way mirror. You're obviously an idiot. Enough of it. Hello? Hello, I said to the phone. I am saying hello one more time to the phone. Hello. No. I didn't say anything. I guess their tape recorder's broken. I wish they would just drone these people. Drone them. Why not put it to a public referendum? Should we drone spam callers? I think it'll pass. Let's just have a public referendum. And let's just drone the fuckers till dead. World can't help but be a much better place the next day. Got to be a better place. This is in all these liars too. Commenters on my physics videos. You could drone them and you gotta make the world a better place. Can't miss. You won't leave any cats without food. You won't leave any decent thing needing care. Because they're all indecent, cruel, sadistic, insane defenders of silly woo-woo. They're all eating unicorn shit. They're sickos. Alright, so I'm sure I'm out of time. I won't bother bibble-babbling about anything else. Let's see. Oh yeah, 59 minutes. We're done. So, till next time and such.